So good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Thank you for joining us. My name's Petra Davidson. I head up marketing for Panzura. And with me is Glenn Shark. Glenn is our VP of Customer Success. He runs the team who are your account managers. Many of you have probably met him. You know, he's doing a tour of our customer base right now. So if you haven't met him, you will soon. Drop us, as we go through this webinar, please use the questions, the chat, to send us any questions or comments that you have. Glenn is super technical, by the way, so no question is too technical. I'm less technical, so no question is too silly. So please ask us whatever you would like. So I'm just going to do a quick review before I hand it over to Glenn, and I'll talk a little bit about the CloudFS platform that we have. If you could go to the next slide, Glenn. So many of you who have been with us for some time will remember CloudFS as the global file system. This is now a complete platform. It does what it always did. The cloud file migration consolidates your data, distributes it globally, lets you collaborate between sites. And of course, it makes it immutable. It gives you those 60-second restore points in case of data damage. And we're going to be talking a little bit more about that when we get to the end of the presentation, and also gives you high availability. And then we've got additional modules, Panzura Edge, which gives you that remote access into your file system, data services for your insights and your data intelligence, and then newly renamed Panzura Threat Detection, which we released just last week. So I will talk a little bit more about that at the end of this presentation. But Glenn, with that intro, I will hand it over to you, and let's talk about some features.
Awesome. And I am traveling right now, so I'm on that tour. I have one screen, so Petra will be monitoring the chat, and she'll interrupt me if anybody has any questions. So feel free to ask questions in real time, and Petra will ping me with the question. Those of you that have met me know that we've kind of repackaged CloudFS into a single platform, right? So we're no longer really trying to separate out CloudFS from Edge, from data services, from threat detection. We want to offer it as a single holistic platform that solves all problems related to not only utilizing a global file system or a hybrid data management platform, but also monitoring it and looking at data exfil and accessing it without VPNs as you do via Edge. So it is an entire platform that we're going to market with. As I meet each and every one of you, I've already probably had some of this conversation with some of you, but if you want to continue this conversation, please feel free to reach out, gshok@panzura.com. So this is the CloudFS that you know and love. It is a global file system. And all sites can see the entire file system. So some of the functionality that we brought in is historically we've had one object store, but with the release of 8.5, we can now support multiple object stores within AWS and Azure using their sync functionality. We'll be talking about that in a little bit, but this is truly a single unified file system that can span multiple clouds as well as on-premises. So as many locations as you want. We have customers with a couple of locations. We have customers with now, I think they're up to 5 object stores across the globe, all synchronized to 50 or 60 locations, all utilizing CloudFS and collaborating on the same files all across the globe. So something that we have introduced within 8.5 is high availability, another level called Instant Node. So going back to what we've had before, we've had local HA. So local HA meant that within your environment, right, within a single CloudFS node, you create a secondary CloudFS node. If the primary fails, it fails over to the secondary. So you're investing in 2 times the hardware, right, for about a 1-minute failover, depending on ARP retries and all that kind of stuff. And then you can obviously fail back, but you have 2 times the hardware for a single failover. Global HA was a node that you probably put in the cloud somewhere And if a site went down, that global HA would take over, and it would take over the lock management for that site so that you have access to all of your files within the entire global file system for read and for write. Because as you know, every CloudFS node owns its own locks. So if it goes down, there's no lock management. So we needed to have something that could take over the locks. The majority of our customers that have moved to 8.5 that had some semblance of local HA and global HA have decided to move towards Instant Node. What Instant Node gives you is multiple levels of redundancy at virtually no cost. So if you wanted to replace a local HA, it can. How does it work? If your CloudFS node goes down, Instant Node will bring up a second CloudFS node automatically. And if it is on shared disk, it will utilize that disk and it'll be up in about 5 minutes, right, inclusive of boot time. So it acts like a local HA, but instead of a 1 to 2 minute failover, it's a 5 minute failover using local disk. If you want to use it as a regional outage tool, let's say you have a hurricane coming towards Miami, which I think there might be one on the map right now, you can decide to take the Miami CloudFS node and move it to Tampa, right? So that's not going to be a shared disk, but what it will do is take the most recent master snapshot from your object store. It could take about 10 minutes, depending on the size of that snapshot. And now your Miami node is located in Tampa with the most recent master snapshot, and it's up and running and could be up and running in about 10 minutes, right? And you can redirect everybody there. And then you can actually take that node and bring it back to Miami. What's awesome in 8.5 and 8.5.1 and .1.1 is that we have enabled the creation and the deletion of nodes to happen a lot quicker, right? So we've changed the file system to support creation of new CloudFS nodes and deletion of old CloudFS nodes to be substantially quicker than before. Again, if you need a 1 minute failover, local HA is the way to go. There's really no need for a global HA anymore, right? Because you're dedicating hardware to do something that Instant Node can do within about 5 to 10 minutes. That's our recommendation. If you haven't already asked us for a re-architecture, please reach out to my team. We can look at your environment. We can optimize on cost. 8.5 also brought in a lot of efficiency, so you can use a lot less CPU, a lot less memory, potentially, depending on the usage of the CloudFS nodes. So again, just work with my team and we can get your cost down. Something else that we've brought to bear is this intelligent tiering. You know that we supported automatic intelligent tiering for a while within both AWS, Azure, as well as GCP. But now for AWS and Azure specifically, between 8.4 for AWS and 8.5 for Azure, we now support storage classes. So you don't need to automatically tier down. You can write directly to a lower storage class. In the case of AWS, it supports standard, it supports infrequent, and it supports Glacier instant retrieval. And in the case of Azure, it's hot, cool, and cold. So no tape, right? As long as you're not going to tape, you're good to go. It's up to you which one you want to go to. There's about a consistent 40% cost savings as you go down, depending on your agreement. But on average, it's about a 40% savings every tier you drop. And because you're doing the caching in the CloudFS nodes, the folks that have done this have seen no performance degradation, right? The ones that turned on intelligent tiering a year ago, they've seen no performance changes. But now, if you want, you can just write to the lower tier directly with that class selection. So it saves you the cost of going from hot to cool to cold. You can write directly to cool, or you can write directly to cold. This is exciting if you're a larger organization. So we're really focusing, as you can see, on adding a lot of enterprise feature set to enterprise NAS feature set to CloudFS. The biggest one that we've done, and we did this in 8.5, is regional store. You can use AWS or Azure, and I think Wasabi supports this as well, S3 synchronization within their cloud to make copies of the object stores, right, within any region you want. So let's say you're in US, let's say you're in APAC, let's say you're in EMEA, right? You can make two object stores in the US, you can create one in Germany and EMEA, kind of central, and then you can create one in Tokyo for APAC. And all of those can be synchronized using the S3 sync in AWS or Azure's version or Wasabi's version. And they're all basically mirrors of each other. When you put Cloud, and then you can attach local CloudFS nodes to those object stores. So if you have 10 offices in the US, you split 5 and 5 between East and West. You have 5 offices in EMEA, you throw those up, and then a couple in APAC, Singapore, Tokyo, right? Even China, you can attach the object store in Tokyo, and they can all be collaborating on the same file at the same time. We have customers doing that today, right? This was a feature, just in case you're scared, this was a feature that's been hidden since 8.3, and we've had a couple multinational companies using it since 8.3. We released it publicly in 8.5, right? So right now, this can be used for high availability, but it's manual because you can only connect the CloudFS node to one object store unless you're doing cloud mirroring, which is a different option, which is the CloudFS nodes are doing the mirroring, not the hyperscaler. You can manually move them over, however. So if you have an outage on US West and you have 5 CloudFS nodes, you can manually move them over. Thanks for attending this webinar. You're going to find out something that we're releasing in 8.7, which is N-Cloud access, right? Which means that you'll be able to make a list of object stores that you want that CloudFS node to try, right? So that means that in 8.7, right, you'll be able to configure your CloudFS nodes to be able to go to any object store that's currently being synchronized. So that's coming soon. Because when this was released, I'm like, this is the greatest HA option. It's not there yet, but it'll get there shortly. The nice thing is you're getting local performance, right? The more copies of this you make locally, the more performance you're getting. Since I just saved you 40% in the previous slide for going from hot to cold, right? You can use some of that savings to make a second object store. Something we've released in 8.6 is geofencing, right? For file access and restriction. Geofencing is something that folks have been asking for a while. This is on a node level, right? So you can say what directory structure that node is going to see, or more importantly, not see, right? So what is invisible or what can't leave. So if you have GDPR requirements and data can't leave the UK, for example, then you can ensure that only the UK can see that data and the rest of the global file system can't access it, right? So that geofencing is based on CloudFS nodes within the region, and you can restrict SMB shares, you can restrict access, and we're actually going to record within Panzura Data Services, which is now part of the platform, any denials that happen when people try to get access to something that they shouldn't be accessing. Again, we're targeting now enterprise NAS, right? And AI is huge in general, right? I was on a plane yesterday. I swear half the people on the way to Dallas were wearing some kind of AI shirt, which is crazy to me. Advertising something. I think there might be a convention here. So how do you know if you have enterprise ready storage? Right now, if you're deploying NAS in silos, right? The average, this is from IDC, average IT organization has 6.4 data silos. That's not going to be AI ready. Why? Because if you target AI towards that data set, which could be redundant and old, it's going to cause more and more hallucinations, right? The more overlapping data it has, the higher probability of hallucination, right? Your performance and latency issues, right? If it has to tackle a lot of different locations to get to data, it's going to slow it down. And then again, trust, right? So how does it know if it's the proposal that's final or final, final, or final, final, final? So how does CloudFS help? And specifically being AI ready. Again, from IDC, you probably have about 13 copies of your data, including backups of all your silos, et cetera. CloudFS is a single source of truth. So you don't have to manage those 13 copies that the average company has. You can get that data from a single source of truth, and you can train AI from a single source of data, given a little bit of human intelligence as well. And we're going to talk about that in the next slide. We can put a CloudFS node anywhere you'd like, right? So if you want to start training DeepSeek in using AWS Bedrock on US West, you can put a CloudFS node in US West, dedicate that cache, dedicate that resource. That CloudFS node could have access to whatever data you needed to have access to. It could also be geofenced, right? And you can train AI from that node, not interrupting and not messing with the cache that's local within all of your other regions and locations or on-prem. You don't want egress fees when training an AI, so you generally want to put it where your object store is. You make a CloudFS node and you train the AI there, and it's not going to be impactful from a cost standpoint, but it could be impactful from what you can do with it. And that's what we're going to get into next. And again, the last bit is trust and relevance, right? The more data you throw at an AI, the more confused it can get. So how do we make sure that when you're deploying AI, you can get a quick win? And that's coming in 8.6. That's what's been released. It's very simple, an S3 front end, right? By doing an S3 front end on the CloudFS node, we enable any AI that can now talk S3, right? So they all can talk S3 to be trained on data within your CloudFS environment. So I'm going to give you a very simple and straightforward example. Everybody writes proposals, right? Every business has some kind of RFI, RFP, proposal response function. So if you've been in business a long time, right, you have a lot of proposals that you have completed. Now imagine this scenario. Let's use AWS as an example. You're doing AWS Bedrock DeepSeek, which can run on 2 cores, right? It's cheap to run. You put a CloudFS node in the same region as your object store. You make a user called DeepSeek-proposal within your Active Directory. The only files that you give that user are all of your final proposals, the final, right? Just make sure not to confuse it, right? So make sure you're giving it and you're curating the data that you're having it ingest. And that's the joy of having a global file system. You can just choose which files it has access to, right? And as it grows, you can maybe change your business processes to say, if you've completed a proposal, put it here, right? The final one that actually went to the customer and got purchased. Once you've trained DeepSeek on all of your proposals, any new proposal that comes in the door, request for proposal that comes in the door, you can basically upload it and say, okay, based on all the previous proposals, can you please help me answer this one? And it's going to do 80% of the work, right? And this is an automated function now. You no longer have to, you set this and you kind of forget about it. Now, if you want to go one step deeper, is that most of the AIs can now also do SQL queries. And staying within the AWS environment, let's say that you've trained it on the proposals, PDFs and docs and XLS, but now you have pictures and video and all of this. Well, DeepSeek can't do images or video, but you know what can is AWS recognition, right? And what recognition will do is output to Redshift. So let's say you give it a picture of your building that you built next to an ocean somewhere, and that building is built out of brick, and you've done 10 of these types of projects, right? One of your graphics designers or one of your proposal writers or somebody within your organization can ask it, how many proposals have we completed next to water, right? And this is one of them. And it will tell you, you've done 5 or 10 proposals next to water, And then you can ask, okay, how many of them were brick? We've done 5 of those. And it can show you the pictures. It can bring up the proposals. Or you can say, now leverage those to answer this request for proposal. So now what you're doing is using the AI to reference a Redshift database, right? DeepSeek can do SQL queries, right? And it's getting all this information from your single source of truth, which is CloudFS. All because we've turned on for you an S3 front-end interface. It's very straightforward, and it is a quick win. You're not trying to boil the ocean with AI. You're not training it like Copilot on a large language model or a big brain trying to figure out which data is relevant. You as a human are telling it which data is relevant. It's learning that, and it's performing the expert system function that it's intended to perform. Once you get that running, you can do the same thing for your contracts for your legal team, right? Or any other application that you're looking for. So when you create these AI silos, they're going to be siloed off from users within your organization, but their knowledge is also siloed, which means, again, less hallucination, all that sort of stuff. Any questions on this stuff, Petra? We're good?
All good so far.
All right. So as you know, we have implemented 8.5 and 8.6 to do a lot of cost savings as well as performance boosting. One of the things that we've done from a cost savings perspective is started helping our customers move away from VMware for the obvious reason. Instant Node is the function that we use to do that. Like I said, we can bring up nodes very quickly. You can actually use Instant Node to go from one hypervisor to another. We now have support for Proxmox that's been released. And we have support for the newer AWS and Azure instance types, right? So not only R7, we support R6. The new M's are supported as well. And as you know, what they're trying to do is to get you to move to the new faster processors. So they make the old ones like the M5s that you're probably running on more expensive. And so they're slower, they're more expensive. You can use Instant Node to migrate off if that's something that you'd like to do. In 8.6, we've also released support for full Entra ID without Active Directory. I know there's a couple of you out there that are still running Active Directory within your environment simply because you're running CloudFS. You no longer have to do that. We do support Entra ID now natively without AD. We've also, as you've read, have hard quotas now in 8.6. So that's a feature and function that's been requested for a very long time. So we've implemented hard quota within 8.6.
And we've got to thank God for that. Somebody's been
Yeah.
trying to create the AD bucket.
We're in 1990 now.
Glad to help.
Yep. Okay, so accessing the share without a VPN. We've talked to you about Edge, and Edge is now part of this bundle that I've been talking to everybody about. So what is this new bundle? If you get back with me, what we're talking about is bundling CloudFS with everything Panzura data services that we'll be talking about, including threat detection, as well as one Edge license per licensed CloudFS terabyte. All right, so if you license 100 terabytes of CloudFS collaboration, there's 100 Edge licenses for you. What's an Edge license get you? Edge license gets you VPN-less access to CloudFS. It runs on iOS, it runs on Android, it runs on Mac, and it runs on PC. We also have Outlook integration. We also have Teams integration. So however you want it to look, I'm running on a Mac. My integration looks like OneDrive. So I have both OneDrive and Edge, and when they open up, they look virtually identical. However, we have customers out there like district attorneys' offices with, I think, 170 plus attorneys, but we have 3,000 people using Edge in that environment because they have clients and they have attorneys for their defendants. And those don't require Edge licenses. So no more shadow IT, right? You can basically, within CloudFS, make a directory, in this case, per attorney, per case, and you can dole out links to your clients, and you can make those links time sensitive. You can apply passwords. You have audit logs on all of this, and you can share. There's also DLP functionality in it. We can add watermarks to say who downloaded this file at what time, and it goes across every page of your PDF or Word or whatever people are downloading. So there's a lot of feature function in Edge that we're enabling, and now we're delivering it as part of the platform. So again, this is an example of a user using it within their Outlook. You can basically attach files with an Outlook. We have a Teams integration version 1 right now that we're using, but the Teams native integration is coming shortly. Petra will go over the roadmap there as well. And Edge also helps us support co-authoring for both Office and Google Files. So as you know, Microsoft has locked out their collaboration function to be cloud only, right? So historically, like with Excel, it's supported, that collaboration function is supported within CloudFS for byte range locking, but for PowerPoint and Word, it wasn't. And the reason why it wasn't is they don't give us access to that API. Through Edge, we're able to support co-authoring for both Office as well as Google Files that are sitting within CloudFS. So the file itself rests within the global file system. You right click on it, you turn, and it opens up, and now you can all co-author on Word or PowerPoint. Petra, over to you.
All right, David, yes, global file locking is coming for sure. We've got a roadmap slide right at the end. Yeah, it feels like we've been saying this in a little bit. So yes, stand by. Okay, so all of what Glenn's run through, that you can see we're working really hard to drive cost out of managing CloudFS, and also to give you multiple points of flexibility. None of that matters when and if your data gets damaged, which is why this next part of this is so important. And so a bit over a year ago, we'd released Panzura Detect and Rescue. And that was ransomware detection based on ransomware signature, and also with some machine learning in there to train on your particular environment. Quite often you have peculiarities in your environment that just aren't obvious until you start running a service like this over it. For example, we had a customer who had a lot of JPEGs with zero kilobits. And that's not usual for a JPEG file. So peculiarities like this, Detect and Rescue was spotting those and learning from them. And look, detecting in an active file system is actually more difficult than it sounds. It's easy to run across a backup any kind of inert data because it doesn't matter how much processing power you use. But when you're running in a file operation with file operations happening minute by minute, you can't get in the way of those. And so what we developed is this very lightweight system that was very accurately detecting just ransomware based on signature. Depending on the severity of the attack, Detect and Rescue could interdict at the user level. And that's obviously the least disruptive level. The other options would be at the whole node level, but that's very disruptive for your entire organization, particularly if you happen to get a false positive. So fortunately, that wasn't happening. We interdict everything at the least disruptive level, and then we give you this complete tracker so that you know exactly what files have been damaged and why. Why is this important? Because with CloudFS, you can get your data back. It's immutable. You've got 60-second restore points, so you will be able to roll back without losing data. However, what was obvious is that it was taking longer for people to investigate what had been damaged than to actually do the restoration. And obviously, the longer an attack is allowed to run, the worse it gets. And so many attacks now with ransomware are able to run in sort of stealth mode, sometimes for weeks before you're even aware that there's a problem. And so obviously, that is a very expensive restoration. And I guess I can tell you on behalf of customers of ours who have had a ransomware attack, nobody realizes quite how bad this is going to be until it happens to you. And so what we aim to do is get you as far ahead of this as we possibly can before it even gets into the rest of your file operations. So that's where we started. And then moving on to the next slide, what we added a few months ago was audit alerts for file operations. Hey, Glenn, if you can click on to the next bit. Thank you. So within Panzura Data Services, you were able to set your own alerts for file operations that were going on that mattered to you. So for example, you might want to know on a particular directory or even for a particular user, if there were multiple file reads, which would indicate data exfiltration. So that was somewhat manual, but that was the next logical step for us. And you can see that's available in there now. You can still set those alerts, and you can even do an evaluation to see, based on what's going on in your file system right now, how many alerts would that surface. And that helps you to fine tune the number that you might want to monitor. And then moving further on to the next slide, we have just released Panzura Threat Detection. So we've renamed Detect and Rescue. Reason we've done that is that we've added this user behavioral intelligence. So now we're not just looking for ransomware, we're looking for any anomalies. And the reason that's important is studies are showing now that about a little over 90% of attacks are being preceded by data exfiltration. And that can be one of the hardest things to spot, because that can happen stealthily over a very long period of time. And it doesn't necessarily correspond with a file deletion. It can just be a machine taking files and moving them to some sort of external drive. And so what this does, again, in a non-disruptive way to file operations, is it builds up an individual profile for every single user that you have, and it sets a baseline activity. So over a period of time, it learns what normal looks like for us. And so, you know, think about this. Glenn and I have completely different file access patterns. He does absolutely nothing. I do a lot of work, but my access patterns tend to be towards the end of the week, because I have a lot of meetings on Monday, and so I'm not working with a lot of files. But towards the end of the week, that's exactly what I'm doing. Glenn's doing a fair bit of travel, and so he's opening files late in the day where he previously wouldn't have. So we have this baseline that gets set over a period of time. And just like with the previous detect and rescue, we can interdict on anomalous behavior depending on the severity, and we give admin alerts as well. And so if we move on to the next slide, we'll take a look at exactly what it's looking at. So exfiltration is the big one. And the way we look at that is an unusually high number of file reads outside of the normal access pattern. So for example, if my account starts reading 100 files at a time, that's abnormal for me. 10 might be normal. And so it's reads without a corresponding move or copy or anything like this. Because we would see that corresponding activity within the file system. If it's just a read, that it indicates something's going somewhere else.
Yeah, just the file open, right? And that exfiltration could be intentional or unintentional. So intentional is, I could be quitting on Friday and I'm taking all of your intellectual property with me. I was just on a call with a customer today that started laughing when I said that, because that just happened to them and they got no alert. They're not on this, by the way, but they will be shortly. So yeah, and then the unintentional data exfiltration is someone that is infected with malware, and they don't know what they're doing, but they are indeed doing it. And as you guys all know, that malware now will try to exfiltrate the data because they know that you're on an immutable file system. So encrypting you is not going to do anything, but holding your data hostage might get them some money.
Yep. Okay, the next thing it's looking for is data destruction. So again, unusual number of deletions. And again, you know, for my example, 2 or 3 deletions might be normal, 100 most certainly is not. And so that's something you've got to take a look at. Then we're also looking at things that aren't necessarily threatening in here because the whole point is abnormalities. So excessive file creation could be another one of those. I usually say that's generally marketing's fault, and it's always cat videos. And that should probably be followed by excessive destruction of said cat videos. That's the sort of thing that we're going to catch. Permissions changes, that's another good one to take a look at. You should not be seeing a mass number of files with permissions changes unless that's driven by one of your admins. If it's my user account going and changing file permissions en masse, then you've probably got a problem. And then the last category, and this you'll see us expand this out, is erratic access patterns, things that just aren't going to be physically possible. So for example, if I'm accessing a file 1 minute from Auckland, New Zealand, where I'm based, and the next minute I look like I'm in Singapore, that's probably not me, unless I'm bouncing around on a VPN, which I tend not to do. So these are the things that we're tracking, and you will see these expand out. Now Brandon's asked, are we doing this on an internal model or are we offloading it? This is proprietary to Panzura. So I'm going to talk a little bit about what we've built here. So the external, the ransomware, part of ransomware tracking is done based on tables of known ransomware. That's just part of the service. And those take feeds from other things. Otherwise, this is internal to Panzura. And so let's talk a little bit about these thresholds, because these are obvious questions for could we be getting false positives? So we build an algorithm and use this to track what normal looks like. So we run this over a rolling 90-day period. Think of an onboarding period of a couple of weeks. However, we can look back at your existing audit logs. So it doesn't have to be a couple of weeks from day one. It can be retrospective based on a couple of weeks of audit logs for existing users. And this threshold figures out what normal looks like. And it also builds in tracking for how much variation there is with a particular user. So for example, I might have much more of a variation in my usage patterns than Glenn does. And so it wouldn't alert for me where it would alert for Glenn. So your movement out of baseline is designed to self-adjust by the user. So there's an ML in there which is specifically designed to figure out the balance between overcorrection and catching something that is very impactful to catch in the moment. And so that's how this works. This was released just last week. It is at no extra cost to those who've already had detect and rescue. This does not come with any additional cost. And also, I think Glenn mentioned this earlier, we're bundling all of these features and functionality within the platform. And so if you've not had a conversation with Glenn's team in a minute, you should do that, particularly when you've got a renewal that's coming up. And so that is threat detection available right now. And if there are no further questions on that, let's jump into the roadmap.